Why did I get a letter from my late mother-in-law? I couldn't believe my eyes as I stared at the envelope in my mailbox. It was from her, even though we had just said our goodbyes at her funeral yesterday. She had always been so kind to me, like a friend despite our age gap. We used to go out and have fun together, and her sudden passing had hit me hard. I was still struggling to accept that she was gone. During my mourning, getting a letter from my mother-in-law was a big shock. As I read it quickly, I discovered something totally unexpected. She had arranged for it to be sent to me by the temple priest after she passed away. Inside, she told me about a hidden door in the family chest and how to find it. She stressed that I should open it alone. Realizing I had the house to myself, I rushed over and used the spare key to get in. Following her instructions, I found the secret compartment and managed to open it. Inside, I found something incredible. I'm Nancy, 35, working as a web designer from home. My husband Tom, 4 years older, and I tied the knot 5 years back. We were introduced by a friend, and our bond remains strong. Sadly, we haven't been able to have kids yet. It's been tough, but my mother-in-law, also named Nancy, has been a source of solace. She always reassures me, saying there's no rush and suggests fun outings like trying out the new waffle place near the station. Her warmth and encouragement have eased my worries about not having children. Though I still long for them, I've decided against aggressive fertility treatments and am letting things happen naturally. My husband Tom travels a lot for work, so my mother-in-law and I often hang out when he's away. Despite our age gap, we've become really close, almost like friends. She lives nearby with my brother-in-law's family, who have 3 kids. But while my mother-in-law gets along with them, my brother-in-law and his wife aren't so friendly towards us because we don't have kids. Nancy, still no kids. We've got 3 wonderful ones here. Not having kids is disrespectful. You should distance yourself from your mother-in-law. Amy, my brother-in-law's wife, often taunts, with Jason, my brother-in-law, joining in with mocking remarks about Tom and me. At first, my husband and I would argue back when my brother-in-law's family made those hurtful comments. But they never listened, so we started avoiding them instead. It's frustrating how they're so rude to us, but pretend to be nice around my mother-in-law. She has no idea what they're really like. We haven't told her because we don't want her to worry unnecessarily. Feeling worried, we rang the doorbell at my in-laws' house, but no one answered. So we used the spare key to get in. "Mom," my husband called out, but there was no reply. With a sinking feeling, we searched the house and found my mother-in-law collapsed in her bedroom. "Oh no," I gasped, rushing to her side while my husband called for an ambulance. My brother-in-law's family must have been out because no one else was home. The ambulance arrived quickly, but despite their efforts, my mother-in-law passed away at the hospital. It was a stroke. My husband and I were devastated by my mother-in-law's sudden passing. We cried endlessly, but there were practical matters to attend to, like arranging the funeral. We knew we couldn't dwell in sadness forever. The funeral was meant to be a family affair, with my brother-in-law taking the lead. Despite some reluctance from him, we all worked together to honor my mother-in-law's wishes. But throughout the preparations, there was a sense of unease with my brother-in-law. While he carried out his duties as the chief mourner, he seemed detached. After brief conversations with relatives, he would abruptly leave, leaving them offended. They would then glare at him as he departed. During the gathering after the funeral, my brother-in-law took the first seat and stayed put, ignoring my husband's attempts to engage him with the guests. He just sat there with his beer, and his wife did the same beside him. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved around, thanking everyone for coming and sharing memories of my mother-in-law. Seeing their parents lounging and drinking seemed to influence my brother-in-law's kids, who busied themselves with games, laughing and nudging each other. It felt more like a casual get-together than a mourning gathering. None of them seemed affected by my mother-in-law's passing, and the relatives noticed. They didn't bother talking to my brother-in-law's family and instead shared memories with my husband and me before saying goodbye. Despite the relatives' noticeable change in behavior, they carried on, ordering more beer, discussing inheritances, and even planning vacations during this solemn time. After everything my mother-in-law did for them, "It's just disrespectful," I muttered, feeling disdainful towards my brother-in-law's family. The next morning, my husband left early for some errands. As I went to check the mailbox for the newspaper, I found a letter addressed to me. Who could this be from? I wondered, surprised as I opened it and realized it was from my late mother-in-law. Why would she send me a letter? I pondered, returning to the living room to read it. Inside, I discovered something unexpected. It seemed she had arranged for the temple priest to send it to me after her passing. The letter contained instructions on opening a chest, accessing a hidden compartment, and the contact details of the family lawyer. And then a note. Please open it alone. I carefully studied my mother-in-law's letter, admiring her strong handwriting despite her delicate frame. Taking a deep breath, I felt the weight of her words, reflecting her resilient spirit. Glancing at the clock, it read 9:30. The house should be empty now, I thought to myself as I prepared to leave. The kids would be at school, and my brother-in-law and his wife likely out on their planned outing, according to a social media post I saw earlier. Despite it being the day after our grandmother's funeral, they seemed eager for a day off using bereavement leave. If their post was accurate, the family home should be deserted. I knew I had to go now, or I might not have another chance. As I stepped into my parents-in-law's house using the spare key, a wave of sadness washed over me. The absence of my mother-in-law, always so warm and welcoming, felt heavy on my heart. Slowly, I made my way to her room. The chest, said to be her trousseau, looked old but well cared for. Following the letter's instructions, I opened it smoothly and found the hidden door at the back, just as described. Relief flooded me as I managed to open it safely. Inside, along with what the letter mentioned, I found another document. What could this be? I wondered, feeling my mother-in-law's love emanating from the papers. Tears threatened to spill, but I knew I had to leave quickly. I couldn't risk being caught there by someone returning home. After all, the letter had emphasized the importance of doing it alone. When I returned home with the documents, I reached out to the family lawyer mentioned in a letter to inform them of my mother-in-law's passing. Just as I was about to contact my husband and my brother-in-law's family to discuss gathering this weekend, an email from my sister-in-law arrived. It urged us to convene at my parents-in-law's house urgently for important news. What could she want to discuss? Despite feeling uneasy, declining seemed strange, so I accepted. That weekend, we nervously gathered at my parents-in-law's house. My brother-in-law and his wife wore smug smiles, and their children were conspicuously absent. As soon as we sat down, they presented a document, my mother-in-law's will. It bore her signature, leaving all assets to my brother-in-law and his wife. You see, we inherit everything, my brother-in-law gloated, his laughter harsh. While my husband looked stunned, I quietly excused myself and discreetly brought in the lawyer waiting outside. Who's this? My brother-in-law and his wife sounded puzzled as the lawyer entered. Even my husband, unaware of the lawyer's presence, looked surprised. This is the lawyer my mother-in-law trusted, I explained briefly. Gradually, confusion turned to anger on my brother-in-law and his wife's faces. A lawyer? Why bring them here? They demanded. It's part of my mother-in-law's instructions. She wanted the lawyer to help draft the estate division agreement smoothly, I replied. They protested loudly, insisting they didn't need legal assistance. My brother-in-law slammed the desk, gesturing to my mother-in-law's will. See, we have her will. We don't need a lawyer, he declared. The lawyer intervened calmly. Are you sure your mother wrote this entire document herself? My brother-in-law affirmed angrily, but the lawyer shook his head. This can't be recognized as a will. A holographic will must be entirely handwritten by the testator, he explained, pointing out inconsistencies in the document. The handwriting looked familiar, but the rest appeared to be printed, likely from a computer. The room fell silent as my brother-in-law reached for the will in front of him. But no matter what he did, the content remained unchanged, neatly printed in Gothic font. Huh? Suddenly, my husband pointed out something strange. Why is the back of the paper so clean? I examined it closely and noticed a discrepancy. The handwriting in the signature section was different from the rest. Could this be a forged will? My brother-in-law and his wife trembled at the lawyer's observation. We wouldn't do such a thing, they protested, but their tension was palpable. The lawyer warned, forgery of a will is a serious crime. Their faces drained of color as they stuttered through excuses. The lawyer delivered the final blow. Nancy has a notarized will, making yours invalid. My brother-in-law and his wife were shocked. What? We never heard of it, they exclaimed. But I remembered the letter from my mother-in-law, mentioning a notarized will hidden behind the chest's secret door. We were just as surprised. In the letter my mother-in-law sent earlier, she disclosed the hiding spot to us. Along with practical details, she explained her reasons for making the notarized will and why she shared it with me. She had sensed her health declining and prepared the will, suspecting that my brother-in-law and his wife might try to interfere with it. While I had thought my mother-in-law was oblivious to my brother-in-law and his wife's true nature, it seemed she had a faint inkling of their greed. The notarized will stipulated that the assets would be split equally between my brother-in-law and my husband. What? She did this? My brother-in-law and his wife were stunned, their eyes wide. Then my brother-in-law's demeanor shifted abruptly, and he exclaimed, "Ah, right. As the eldest son, I'm supposed to be the beneficiary of Mom's life insurance, aren't I?" His eyes gleamed with intensity as he spoke. I replied in a chilly tone, "In addition to the notarized will, your mother also left me the life insurance certificate, with myself as the beneficiary." Inside the hidden compartment of the chest, alongside the notarized will, was the life insurance certificate. My brother-in-law and his wife balked at the documents in disbelief, their eyes fixed on them. "I never heard about this. I had no idea," the lawyer interjected. "Changing a life insurance beneficiary doesn't always require notifying the previous one." Despite my brother-in-law's protests and table slamming, the lawyer intervened. Turning to me, my husband asked anxiously, "When did Mom entrust you with this?" "I didn't know." I reassured him with a smile. "It was all in the letter I received from her. She wanted to tell you too, but she was worried about raising suspicion with your brother and his wife if both of us were involved. So she entrusted it to me alone." "I understand. It makes sense, considering how close Mom and you were," my husband remarked. As we spoke, my sister-in-law burst in, hysterical. "I can't accept this. Why should you, who didn't even show your children to my mother-in-law, inherit her estate? This is ridiculous. I won't accept it." My brother-in-law chimed in, his face reddening with anger. "Exactly. You have no right to Mom's estate. We lived here just for her inheritance. Splitting it equally. Don't make me laugh. It's all ours." My sister-in-law continued to shout, adding to his selfish claims. "We have 3 children. As compensation for not showing my mother-in-law any grandchildren, you should give all of her inheritance to our children for their future. We have given her 3 grandchildren, so we deserve it more. The inheritance belongs to us." Despite my sister-in-law's aggressive outburst, I remained composed. "Your arguments don't make sense. Let's try to calm down," I said calmly, but it only seemed to fuel her anger further. "Your calmness is so infuriating. Just give us the money already. You're worthless without children," she shouted, launching herself at me. My husband and the lawyer stepped in to stop her, but before they could, she landed a punch on my head. "Ouch!" I cried out in pain. "Stop it." My husband and the lawyer managed to restrain her, but she continued to struggle, demanding the inheritance. Her eyes were wild and her face contorted with rage. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law encouraged her, urging her to hit me more. Enraged, my husband called the police to intervene. When the police arrived, my husband and the lawyer briefed them on the situation. My brother-in-law and his wife were escorted away. We thanked the lawyer and decided to let him go for the day. What was meant to be a discussion about dividing the estate turned into chaos. We agreed to send a gift as an apology. My husband had been worried about my well-being since the incident, but he relaxed when I assured him that my headache had gone away. Reflecting on the tumultuous events, I sighed. It's been quite intense. Then my husband brought up something unexpected. "You know, Amy always seems to boast about her children and money," he said. It was true. My sister-in-law constantly flaunted her children and showed an intense fixation on money. During the previous argument about money, my sister-in-law's fixation on her children and money became evident. Her expression during the altercation was truly frightening. "You're right, it's a bit unsettling," my husband mused, falling into silence afterward. Sensing his unease, I asked, "Is something bothering you?" "Yeah, there's something on my mind. I'm thinking of suggesting it to my brother. I believe it might be wise to have DNA tests done for their 3 children," my husband revealed, surprising me. "DNA tests?" I echoed, taken aback. "Yeah, and I'm also considering proposing a background check on Amy. Something doesn't feel right. It's just a gut feeling," he explained. Though I initially thought it might be unnecessary, my husband's intuition had proven accurate before. "All right, if that's what you think, let's discuss it with your brother later." When my husband broached the topic with my brother-in-law, he reacted with ridicule and extensive yelling. "Just because you don't have kids yourselves, don't doubt ours," he shouted. However, before leaving, he demanded materials about DNA testing from my husband. It seemed my brother-in-law had his own thoughts on the matter. The shocking truth emerged from the DNA tests conducted between my brother-in-law and his children. It was revealed that 2 out of 3 of his children did not share his blood. I had my doubts about the youngest because their features didn't resemble either of us much. But I never expected this from the middle one. My husband muttered, stunned by the revelation. My brother-in-law delved into his wife's background, and the findings were damning. It appeared that my sister-in-law had been involved with multiple men even before marrying my brother-in-law. Furthermore, her recent affairs had been exposed to the wives of her lovers, who were now seeking compensation. As my sister-in-law spent more time at home than my brother-in-law, she carefully concealed any notices, such as registered letters. Upon examining the details, it became clear that the total amount of compensation demanded far exceeded my sister-in-law's earnings or savings. Ultimately, it seemed my sister-in-law was determined to claim my mother-in-law's inheritance for herself at any cost. As events unfolded, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law escalated into a violent altercation, hurling objects and exchanging blows until blood was drawn. Disturbed by the commotion, neighbors alerted the police, leading to their arrest on charges of assault, in addition to the ongoing investigation into the forged will. Further inquiry revealed a history of theft and harassment against wealthy individuals, compounding their legal troubles. Ultimately, both ended up incarcerated. Concerns arose about the future of their 3 children, for whom we were now the closest relatives since our mother-in-law's passing. Despite considering taking them in, we hesitated. The children had been deeply influenced by their parents' toxic behavior, referring to us disdainfully as childless incompetence. Even the eldest at 14 and the youngest at 7 demonstrated a shocking lack of respect or understanding of proper conduct. Despite their parents' predicament, their attitudes remained unchanged. Hearing our 14-year-old nephew dismiss us as childless idiots was disheartening beyond words. Exposed to such hostility, we found it impossible to nurture affection or optimism about their upbringing. In the end, we decided to reach out to my sister-in-law's parents and formally cut ties with the children. It seemed they understood our decision, as our nephew bitterly remarked, "I'd rather live in Grandma's old shack with a clueless, childless couple." It was clear this was the best course for everyone involved. We chose not to disclose the fact that the younger 2 children were not biologically related to my brother-in-law. Whether to reveal the truth or not, we left in the hands of my brother-in-law and his wife's relatives. My husband and I made the decision to relocate to a distant place, using the inheritance from my mother-in-law to start anew. Our new home was surrounded by lush greenery and nature, instantly making us feel at peace. There was a quaint waffle shop nearby, where we often reminisced about my mother-in-law, wishing she could have joined us. Shortly after the move, I discovered I was pregnant, a long-awaited blessing that filled us both with overwhelming joy. The positive pregnancy test brought tears to our eyes, and later, the doctor confirmed the news, leaving us elated. We couldn't help but imagine how thrilled my mother-in-law would have been if she were still with us. In addition to the pregnancy, the entrepreneurial venture I had been quietly planning was also progressing smoothly. My husband and I worked diligently, anticipating the arrival of our child and cherishing each day filled with happiness.